news tonight, the Prime Minister discusses with Egyptian and Iraqi transport officials a railway project linking the three countries that will increase economic and trade cooperation. Iran rejects a U.S. decision to deny a visa for its newly appointed ambassador to the United Nations, pledging to take up the case directly with the world body. And pro-Russia armed men seize official buildings in cities in eastern Ukraine and hoist the Russian flag, deepening a standoff with Moscow. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. We begin here at home, where Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour met with Egyptian Minister of Transport Ibrahim Dumeiri and Secretary General of the Iraqi Transport Ministry Salman Jassim to discuss a railway project linking the three countries. During the meeting, Mansour was briefed on profits achieved by the Arab Bridge Maritime Company, a significant joint venture of the governments of Jordan, Egypt and Iraq. Since it was founded, the company, now convening its General Assembly meeting in Amman, made an accumulated profit of more than $250 million. The meeting also reviewed the outcomes of the Jordanian Egyptian and the Jordanian Iraqi Higher Committee meetings, which convened recently. And so said the railway link between Mashriq and Maghrib will further increase economic and trade cooperation between countries and enhance their common interests. The International Monetary Fund Director for the Middle East and North Africa, Masoud Ahmad, said the Jordanian economy is showing signs of recovery. Speaking at a news conference in Washington, he said the Jordanian government has put in place recovery measures to achieve a 3% growth. He acknowledged the effect of the Syria conflict on Jordan's economy, saying the situation there constitutes a catastrophe to the kingdom. Earlier, the IMF Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, praised the economic reforms Jordan is undertaking in accordance with the credit readiness agreement signed with the government. She pledged the fund's continued financial and technical support to Jordan to help reinvigorate the economy and promote investment. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas held talks in the West Bank city of Ramallah with Britain's opposition Labour Party leader Ed Miliband at the end of his three-day visit to the region. Yesterday, Miliband met with the Israeli Prime Minister. Miliband, who is Jewish, said he supported the homeland for the Jewish people, but also made it clear he does not back all actions of the Israeli government. Speaking after his visit to the Khan al-Ahmar camp earlier in the day, Miliband said what he saw today shows that the expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank is not only wrong and illegal, but represents a mortal threat to the two-state solution and to a successful outcome of the peace process. And over to Syria, where there are reports of poisoning and suffocation in rural areas around Hama, now under rebel control. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said government forces had dropped barrel bombs on Kufr Zeta, while the Syrian official media blamed the attack on the Nusra Front fighters. Syrian television said the group used chlorine gas in the attack, adding that 2 people were killed and 100 were affected. Elsewhere, the observatory said fierce fighting, which began last night close to the Air Force intelligence offices west of Aleppo, continued today and described the fighting as the fiercest since 2012. In eastern Ghouta and Damascus, rebel units clashed with government forces. Social media footage purported to show fighting in rural Der'a. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns has announced he will step down from public life in October. In a 32-year career, Burns held some of the most sensitive and influential jobs in American diplomacy, including Undersecretary for Political Affairs, Ambassador, Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, and top U.S. diplomat for the Middle East. His most significant role, however, was leading secret talks with Iran that helped produce the November 2013 agreement, under which Tehran agreed to limit its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. There was no immediate word on who might replace Burns. Iran dismissed a U.S. decision to deny a visa to its proposed new envoy to the United Nations, Hamid Abu Talbi, saying it would take up the case directly with the world body. Washington objects to Abu Talibi because of his suspected participation with a radical Iranian group of students that seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in November 1979. U.S. President Barack Obama came under strong domestic pressure not to allow Abu Talibi into the country to take up his position in New York. The veteran diplomat has acknowledged that he acted as an interpreter for the militants who held the hostages. Iran's foreign ministry spokeswoman said Tehran has followed the diplomatic procedures in regard to its diplomat and is waiting for an official response.
It is necessary for me to announce to you that we are following the normal diplomatic procedures for this issue. The headquarters of the United Nations is based in the US. We have carried out the necessary correspondence with the American government regarding the issuance of a visa for Iran's chosen envoy. Our envoy has been chosen from our point of view, and the bureaucratic steps have been taken to introduce him.
Over to Ukraine, and pro-Russia fighters have raised their flags over official buildings in two eastern Ukrainian cities, further deepening a standoff with Moscow. Protesters in Donetsk have also been occupying an administrative building, the epicenter of the Donetsk protests, since pro-Russia activists seized it last Sunday, calling for a referendum to bring them closer to Russia. Kyiv is warning the standoff is dragging Europe closer to a gas war that could disrupt supplies across the continent and impact millions of people across Europe. Here's more.
Clashes like these in Ukrainian cities are an almost regular occurrence since Russia's annexation of Crimea last month. Tensions ratchet another notch as Russia puts the squeeze on Ukraine over possible gas supply cuts. The crisis once again tops the agenda of the world's leading rich nations. After meetings this week, US Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew warns Russia that the group of 7 developed nations will support further sanctions if necessary.
There's nobody in the room, myself included, who wants to be in the position where additional sanctions are necessary. The purpose is to make it clear to Russia that they need to step back. But it was equally clear that if they don't, if they step forward, if they do things that are illegal, that violate the sovereignty of Ukraine, that there will be unity in the world in responding to that.
The appeal comes as Washington announces a third round of sanctions against people the US has linked to Russia's seizing of Crimea. The Treasury says the US-based assets of one former Ukrainian official, a Crimea-based energy firm, and 6 Crimean leaders have been frozen. At the same time, NATO released more than 20 satellite images showing up to 40,000 Russian troops massed near Ukraine's eastern border. Ukraine and the West condemn Moscow's annexation of Crimea. The decision to release these images shows just how concerned these countries are about the build-up of troops in what's been called Europe's biggest political confrontation since the end of the Cold War.
A massive international operation is combing a remote area of the southern Indian Ocean where officials believe flight MH370 crashed. But as planes scour a large search zone thousands of kilometers west of Australia for possible floating debris, ships focus on a smaller area where signals have been picked up. Ships continue to listen for acoustic signals, although authorities have admitted that there have been no confirmed detections over the past 24 hours. Vessels would use a towed pinger locator to track transmissions until officials are sure the black box batteries, which last about a month, have run out. Once they die, a submersible drone will be sent down to the ocean floor for wreckage in what will be a laborious and painstaking task. U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Caroline Kennedy, was a train passenger for the day, but it's no ordinary train and no ordinary ride. Traveling at the speed of 600 kilometers per hour, the train actually floats above the tracks. Sitting beside her was the Japanese Prime Minister, and according to this report, she seemed to enjoy the fast ride.
It's full speed ahead for U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Caroline Kennedy. She's touring a developmental magnetically levitated train with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The train, called maglev, actually floats above the tracks. whipping across the rails at more than 350 miles per hour or nearly 600 kilometers per hour. And the U.S. ambassador seems to enjoy the ride.
Was wonderful, and I think that this technology is something that will bring great benefits to Japan, hopefully the United States one day, and to inspire a new generation of young scientists to want to do more and study science and technology. So congratulations on this achievement.
The Japanese Prime Minister agrees.
I hope this sort of top-level Japanese technology will be used more around the world. In particular, I would like for our ally, the United States, to make use of it.
Japan's maglev route between Tokyo and Nagoya is set to open in 2027. It's expected to cost some $60 billion.
The largest flawless, fancy, vivid blue diamond ever to appear at auction is on display at Christie's, New York, before leading at the upcoming magnificent jewels sale in Geneva. Named the Blue and described as blue perfection by experts, it is pegged at $21 million to $25 million. The stone weighs 13 carats and is believed to be a South African stone. And while the blue is the chief draw of the upcoming sale, there are other fancy delights for jewelry lovers. The Ocean Dream, the largest fancy vivid blue-green diamond in the world at 5.5 carats, the Raja diamond, as well as an array of necklaces, brooches, and earrings will be on sale. Christie's hopes that the overall sale in Geneva will fetch upwards of $100 million. We begin with basketball and the NBA. The Miami Heat beat the Indiana Pacers 98-86 to the British sailor who was rescued from the Pacific Ocean last week after being lost overboard finally arrived in San Francisco. Andrew Taylor was rescued after spending around 1.5 hours in the water after being swept overboard by high winds while changing a sail. Other competitors diverted to help in the search, and racing has now resumed. The Clipper race started in London on September 1st and will finish there at Tower Bridge on July 12th. And finally, relatively cold and partly cloudy conditions continue tonight, with northwesterly moderate to brisk winds stirring dust in the desert region. Tomorrow it will be fair in most regions with northwesterly moderate winds. Further south in the Gulf of Aqaba, it will be warm tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and slightly choppy seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. The Prime Minister discusses with Egyptian and Iraqi transport officials a railway project linking the three countries that will increase economic and trade cooperation. Iran rejects a U.S. decision to deny a visa for its newly appointed ambassador to the United Nations, pledging to take up the case directly with the world body. And pro-Russia armed men seize official buildings in cities in eastern Ukraine and hoist the Russian flag, deepening a standoff with Moscow. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.